Welcome to Learning Kitchen Live Home Edition. I'm Jessica Burch, one of the dietitians at Community Servings. Welcome to my kitchen. So today I'm going to be talking about sodium or salt. Different ways that we can cut back in it in our dishes or the dishes that we make at home while increasing the flavors in other ways. And talk a little bit about why it's important to cut back on the salt, why dietitians, doctors, nurses tell you that cutting back on salt would be a good idea for your health. Before I get started, I just wanted to remind all the viewers at home that in the spirit of healthy eating, our friends at Always Health Partners are going to be giving one of our viewers a brand new Instant Pot. If you're not familiar with what an Instant Pot is, it's a combination pressure cooker and slow cooker. It's a fantastic tool to have on hand if you're trying to streamline cooking for you and your family. There are thousands of recipes out there, some of them obviously healthier than others, that utilize an Instant Pot. And if you're interested in entering to win, all you have to do is create your version of one of the dishes that Val, Beth, or myself created on Learning Kitchen Live this month. The recipes, if you forgot, are posted in the comments section below the video on the Facebook page. Create your own special version, put your own twist on it, take a picture of your beautiful creation, and post it in the comments section below the video. At the beginning of February, we'll randomly draw a winner and make an announcement as to who gets this wonderful kitchen tool. So it couldn't be easier, and even more reason to try one of the recipes that we've shared with you this month. That being said, let's get started. So I have 3 recipes that I'm going to share today, and I know that might sound like a lot, but they're all really straightforward and really simple, based on the idea of increasing flavor using things other than salt. So we're going to talk about adding vegetables to create layers of flavor. We're going to talk about roasting to increase flavor, and we're going to talk about using different spices and herbs to increase flavor. So the first recipe is a wild rice pilaf, and I already made it, but this way you'll get to see it. It's just finishing its simmer in the pot over here, but I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I did to really bump up the flavor in this dish without adding any salt to it. So if you're not familiar with wild rice, it looks like this. You see? They're kind of like, a dark black chasm in the bottom of this bowl. They're really long. Let me see if I can pick one up that's a good example. So they're really, maybe. It's a long, thin, black rice grain. And I actually combined this with brown rice because I like the different textures when they're combined together. And the reason that I picked this is just because it's something different. If you eat rice on a regular basis, having a slightly different flavor, a slightly different texture can be nice. I get tired of the same thing over and over again. So by combining the wild rice with the brown rice, I'm getting a different texture and a different flavor. The nice thing about wild rice is it's a whole grain, just like the brown rice. And we're constantly trying to remind you that having more whole grains in your diet is really important. Whole grains have everything that a delicious plant has to offer. The vitamins, the minerals, the fiber, the protein that's in the whole grain. Whereas things like, just turning off my rice because I can see it's done. White rice, they strip all of that away and you lose a lot of the nutrients that would otherwise be in the dish. So choosing brown rice is always going to be better for you. Or choosing whole grains, we know through lots of research, can help reduce blood pressure. It can help control blood sugars. The fiber that comes in whole grains acts as a broom and sweeps our body clean. So choosing a whole grain is a great way to improve your health with just a small change to what you're eating on a regular basis. Now, how do I make this taste extra delicious without adding any salt? Remember, I'm going to post the recipes below the video in the comments section at the end, so you can get the full breakdown there. But what I did was I made a pilaf, and that's just a fancy way of saying I'm going to cook my grains with some vegetables. So typically a pilaf includes celery, onion, and carrots, but I mixed it up a little bit, and instead I did carrots, onion, and red bell pepper. The red bell pepper puts this yummy, delicious sweetness in that pairs really nicely with the nuttiness of the wild rice. And it's just, a different color, which gives us different vitamins. It's a different flavor. And what I did is I sauteed my veggies in the bottom of the pan in just about 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil. After they cooked down, I threw in my grains, so half and half brown rice and wild rice. So gave it a stir just to coat the rice with some of the olive oil and mix the vegetables throughout. And then I added low sodium chicken broth. You can use water. I just chose the chicken broth for another dimension of flavor. So I put in a bay leaf because again, that just gives some more flavor, more depth, more excitement to the dish without adding any salt. So the only salt in that dish is going to come from the low sodium chicken broth. Bring it up to a boil, reduce to a simmer, let it do its thing. The thing about wild rice is it has a little bit more of a crunch to it than even brown rice does. So taste it after the water's absorbed, and if you feel like it's still a little too crunchy, you can add a little bit more liquid to let it soften up a little bit. But it is going to be a little bit crunchier if you're not familiar with it, you've not used it before. So that is our wild rice pilaf, and again, adding lots of flavor with those sauteed vegetables, using the bay leaf without using any salt. Dish number 1. So if you're just joining now, this is Learning Kitchen Live Home Edition. I'm Jessica, and we're talking about cooking a delicious meal without adding a lot of salt to the dish. Just went over my wild rice pilaf that has just finished its simmer, and I'll show you it in a few minutes. And now we're going to cover simple roasted vegetables. So if you're trying to find a way to infuse a lot of flavor into something as simple as, say, a carrot, a really good way to try to do that is by roasting them. It takes a little bit longer than, say, sauteing or steaming or pulling out like a bag of frozen carrots, but the trade-off is just this flavor bomb that you'll get from roasting them. So the vegetables that I chose in my simple, what did I call the recipe? Simple roasted vegetables recipe was carrots and parsnips and Brussels sprouts. My 2-year-old, I'm so lucky, his favorite thing right now is roasted Brussels sprouts. I don't know even where that came from. I guess because his mom likes them, but he asks for them all the time. So I had to include them. That's what I had on hand. That's what my family likes. That's what's easy for me to come by. If you don't have those vegetables on hand, use what you do have. Use what is available. If all you've got is carrots, as I said, roasting them is going to give you a whole new flavor profile. It's going to be delicious and a different way of eating something that you might not, normally do. All you've got is onions. Roasted onions are delicious. You can fold them into whatever else you're eating and get a whole new layer of flavor. So just give it a try. Try roasting vegetables if you haven't done it before. Try different vegetables than you've ever roasted before. So, a lot of people might not think of roasting Brussels sprouts or broccoli or kale, but they roast really well, and it adds this whole new approach to what it is that you're tasting and eating and cooking. One thing, well, there's lots of things, but one thing that I will say about roasting vegetables is if you've ever seen, a recipe in a cookbook or on, a food-based magazine, you see these, beautiful tray with all of the different vegetables intermingled with thyme sprigs and garlic cloves and lemon zest. It looks gorgeous. It will taste good. The problem is that in reality, those vegetables all intermingled cook at different times. And so if you're combining Brussels sprouts and carrots and parsnips and sweet potatoes and beets and cranberries and whatever else it is that you might be roasting on one pan, you might find that the carrots are still a little crunchy, the center of the sweet potato is totally raw, and your Brussels sprouts are charred. So instead, what I recommend doing is flavor them all the same way. And if you have multiple pans, cook your different vegetables on different pans so that when the Brussels sprouts are done, you can pull them out. Let the carrots roast a little bit longer. If you don't have different pans, split the pan in half so you don't have to individually pick all of the Brussels sprouts out. You can just clear off one half of the pan and stick the carrots back in to finish. The other thing is if you're doing vegetables that are similar, so things like carrots and parsnips, they're essentially the same shape and size. What I would recommend doing is try to cut them so they're about the same size and shape. That way they cook more evenly, and you'll get them to finish at the same time, so that again, you're not trying to pick out the ones that are already done. You're getting something that's kind of completed all at once. It'll just make your life a little bit easier. So let me I was just gonna demonstrate how I prep a Brussels sprout to roast. So if you've got your Brussels sprout, all that you wanna do is cut off the bottom part here, this little stemmy bit. So I'm gonna give that a chop. And then what I do is I just chop it in half. Just like, well, this is how I would steam them or saute them as well. And then I've already rinsed this, but then I take off typically the most outer layer of leaves, because those are the ones that are more bruised, might be torn, might have a little bug hiding in them, and that way you just kind of take that part off. And then I put these in a bowl, toss them with a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of black pepper. I did do a little sprinkle of salt, like a pinch of salt for the whole bowl, and then I put some thyme on them as well, and lay them out flat, cut side down on a baking sheet, and then I roast them. And as you can see here, oh, look at those beautiful Brussels sprouts already roasted like magic. And what we're going for is this nice caramelization. Can you see that on the bottom side? They're soft, and on the top part, you know, they start to flake apart a little bit, and they get a little browned. These are delicious, super easy, could not be easier to make, and they will fold in really nicely with my carrots and parsnips that are still in the oven roasting. So that is an overview of the rice pilaf and the roasted Brussels sprouts and roasted carrots and parsnips. And again, so these are just, I'm layering flavors in different ways, creating ways to flavor the food without adding a lot of salt. Now, the next method that I want to talk about for cutting back on salt is herbs and spices. Our best friends when it comes to trying to find ways to cut back on salt. So I'm gonna do a blackened tilapia. And that doesn't mean that it's burnt. Hopefully I won't burn it. What it means is that I'm using paprika, and paprika, when it starts to cook, it turns black. So we don't wanna burn, we just wanna blacken. So I'm gonna make a spice rub. And so what I have here on my plate is 2 teaspoons of paprika. This is sweet paprika. You could use smoked. It would just give a smoky flavor to the dish, so whatever you prefer. I've got a teaspoon of thyme. I've got half a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of fennel, a teaspoon of oregano, and then I have a half a teaspoon of salt. So yes, there is salt in this, but it is a very small amount when you look at all of the other spices and herbs that are going into this dish. This is also a spice rub, so it's not like the entire thing is gonna go in. And if it did, and you were gonna eat this whole thing at once, it would be 200 milligrams of sodium per serving, which is, oh my goodness, what is that? Maybe like a 1/7 of what you're supposed to have for the whole day. So in the grand scheme of things, not a huge amount. You could leave the salt out altogether too if you wanted. So all I'm gonna do is mix my blend together. It's really, really hard to do this, as you can see. Hardest thing I've had to do all day. And it smells fantastic. And you can leave out any of these herbs or spices if you don't have them. You know, create your own spice blend, use the flavors that you like, or try something new. If you've never tried this before, this is a great blend to use. Oh, I meant to say too that my husband doesn't like super spicy things. Cayenne pepper goes really well in this, and it gives an extra punch of flavor and heat. I left it out. But if you like spicy, you can add about a half a teaspoon, quarter teaspoon, depending on your level of spice love to this dish, or to this spice rub, and get it that way. Okay, spice rub complete. I think it was actually harder to kind of measure them out and put them on the plate to make it look so pretty beforehand. You don't have to do that. Dump them in a bowl. All right, and then I've got my tilapia fillets. So I just have two because it's just my husband and I, and we'll give a little bit to my son to eat. But the recipe is for 4 fillets, or 16 ounces of fish. Each of these is about 4 ounces. And the reason I picked tilapia is because it is a very mild fish. So if fish isn't something that you like, this is a great entry into the fish realm. It is pretty forgiving with cooking, and it's really accessible and really inexpensive. You can find it pretty much at any grocery store, fish counter. You can often get it frozen in bags, and it doesn't cost very much. So these fillets are actually really even. A lot of the time, if I get tilapia, one section of it, and here I'll show you this. The top section, so this, if this was our little swimming fish, this would be the tail, this would be where his head is. Yes, this was a fish at one point. Typically this fillet is very thick. You can see it's a little bit thicker on the top than it is on the bottom, but they're relatively similar. If what you get is a fillet that has a much thicker part on the top, you can cut it in half so that the thinner part is cooked separately. That way when it's done, if it's super thin, it could cook it in a minute, then you're not getting a really overcooked piece and a really undercooked piece. It will cook more evenly. But if you don't have time for that, don't worry about it. So I have my fish fillets, and what I'm gonna do is get a spoon. I now have fishy fingers, hold on. My carrots and parsnips are just about done. I'm gonna turn off my oven and let them finish a little bit. And now I'm gonna get a spoon to scoop up my spice rub and just sprinkle it on my fish. I think it probably ends up being about a teaspoon of the spice rub per side of the fish. I'm going to turn on my pan, so you gotta have a way to cook it, right? And I'm gonna do this is my really hot burner, so I recommend medium-high heat. You want to warm up your pan. This has a poppy seed in it from who knows what. If you have a really hot burner, as I do, you just want to watch it because we want to blacken it, not burn it, and hopefully I can demonstrate that for you today. So I'm going to let this heat up evenly, and while that's going, I'm just going to the reason I'm not sticking my fingers in this is I want to save the leftover spice blend to use for something else. Oh, and I meant to say before, if tilapia is not for you, pick another fish. This would go really well with shrimp. It would go really well with scallops. If you don't like fish, you can do this with chicken. You can cut thin, what is that called? Thin cuts of chicken, what is the word? Oh, cutlets, there we go. You can do thin cutlets of chicken so that it cooks pretty quickly in your saute pan. Or if you have like a thicker breast, you can blacken both sides and stick it in the oven to finish. You can also do the same thing with lean cuts of pork, like pork tenderloin. This rub would be really good on a pork tenderloin if that's something that you like or eat as well. So I just spread my spice rub. Oh, it's so aromatic. And I'm spilling it, but that's okay. On both sides of my fish. And I am going to put some olive oil, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. If you've got a non-stick pan, you can skip the olive oil piece altogether. I don't. This is hot, hot, hot. And then we're gonna just put our fillets in. So I'm gonna let these cook for, these are pretty thin, so I'm gonna check them after about a minute. If they're thicker, it's maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3. You're just gonna have to judge based on how hot your stovetop is and how thick the meat is. So let me just clear this away. Rinse off my fingers. And then, while this is cooking, we can chat for a moment, or I can chat at you for a moment, about why we want to cut back on sodium. So we talked about, ways to do it. Different cooking methods, layering in flavors through sauteing vegetables, using herbs and spices. But why do we want to do it? Why does it matter? So we're programmed to crave salt. Our body doesn't create it naturally, and we need it for different things throughout the body. It helps with nerve impulses, it helps with your heartbeat. It's an important thing that we do need. However, there is so much salt available to us that we tend to overdo it. Plus, because it's known that we love salt, food companies that want you to buy more of their products put more salt on them so they taste even more delicious, so you're gonna buy more of them. So we're basically fighting this uphill battle against the amount of salt that's out there and the amount of salt that's available and the amount of salt that we want to eat. Why does it matter? Why can't we just have all the salt that we want? Well, so when your body has more salt than it needs in the bloodstream, it causes extra fluid, water, blood, to come into your blood vessels. So imagine a hose, a garden hose, that the water's just running through normally, but then all of a sudden you increase the pressure a lot. And that increased pressure is an increase in blood pressure because there's more water going through, or more blood going through the blood vessels. That increased pressure over a long period of time, so if you get a lot of extra salt over a long period of time and your blood pressure stays up over a long period of time, can actually damage the blood vessels. It can lead to things like heart attack, stroke, aneurysm, things that we do not want and don't want to have to face. So if you can avoid that by finding ways to cut back on the salt that you're eating every day, you're setting yourself up for success. I'm gonna flip these. I meant to say that if you have any questions, please post them in the comment section, and if I can see them come up, I will answer, or one of my colleagues will also can type an answer to you as well. All right, so I'm gonna give my fish food. That wasn't very, I don't know. Wasn't very artfully done, but it was still done. And smells good. I'm gonna have a good lunch today. All right. And as you can hopefully see, it's starting to get blackened. So the more paprika that you put into this, the more blackened it will get. The more you overcook it, the more blackened it will get too, but let's not do that. But you don't have to do the paprika. You don't have to do blackened tilapia. You can do any spice rub you want tilapia. All right, so this is gonna just take another moment to cook. And while that's happening, let's just really quickly revisit some of the points that I made about salt. Salt is good, we want it, but it's not great for us in the long term. So what we want to try to do is find ways to cut back on the amount of salt that we're eating. Do that by choosing spices and herbs, incorporate as many different flavors. Try things you've never had before. You can get little amounts and fold it into dishes to cut back on the salt, using other things instead. You can use vinegar. There's no salt in vinegar, but it really enhances flavor in a similar way. You can use things like lemon juice and lime juice. They are also an acidic food, clearly, and that acid will enhance the flavor. You can roast things, you can saute things, steam things. Every different cooking method is going to create a different flavor profile. And then finally, you can use other things to flavor foods besides herbs and spices, things like vegetables, like the red bell pepper, garlic, carrots, onions, those types of things that I folded into the rice that I'm going to show you in just a second. All right, so see how easy that was? And this is done. That's the nice thing about tilapia, or really any fish, is it cooks really quickly. All right, and I didn't burn it, and it's beautifully blackened. So we've got a win-win. All right, so beautifully blackened tilapia. And what I'm gonna do is move my pan out of the way. Pull out my carrots and parsnips. So these beauties, this is kind of like my ideal meal. Roasted vegetables with a bowl of rice. Maybe some, all right. So, and then let's take a peek in here, and I will give you a little overview, ooh, sizzly, of what we've got going here to put together our meal. So remember to create either this dish, one of the components of this dish, one of Val's dishes, one of Beth's dishes. You have so many options out there. Take a picture of it and post it in the comment section below the video. Then you will be entered to win a brand new Instant Pot provided by our friends at Always Health Partners. And you got a dinner out of it too. All right, where'd my spatula go? Or in my case, a lunch. And actually, I would probably put more vegetables on this plate, but here we go. Ta-da, delicious roasted vegetables, wild rice pilaf, and a blackened tilapia. I hope you give it a try. Don't forget to enter to win the brand new Instant Pot, and take care. Thanks for joining.